Hey, it's Ivy, the host of Feng Shui It, and today we have an amazing guest for you for the Chinese New Year. We have Beth Grace joining us from a satellite location so that we can get all the great information about the Chinese New Year. But before we start that interview, make sure you hit the subscribe button so that you can never miss an episode and find out all of the happenings with the Chinese New Year. So Beth Grace, thank you so much for joining us today.
Oh, it's my pleasure. Thank you for having me.
And so Beth Grace is a feng shui consultant, and she is also a professional Chinese astrologer. And so we're going to talk about the idea of Chinese astrology today and other maybe ways that my audience is just not aware that you can use Chinese astrology, because the biggest thing with Chinese astrology is we want to get across the fact just right up front is it's not fortune telling, right? Like this is not, this is actually a pretty complex system. Not only to understand, but to be able to look at for another person's life and really give some good predictions or some good tools in order for the person to use and utilize in their lives. So the first thing I want to talk about, because we've been having a discussion with some other guests about Chinese astrology, but the first question that I have for you is, how is Chinese astrology able to provide an entire year of predictions? Because that seems like a lot of information. So how in the world is the system able to do that?
It is a lot of information. First of all, let me put Chinese astrology into the context of the bigger picture. Chinese astrology and feng shui are part of a larger integrated holistic system, which includes things that you might be more familiar with, like traditional Chinese medicine and acupuncture. So it's really one huge comprehensive system and does cover a lot of information. The way we understand Chinese astrology is that the moment in time when you're born, when you take your first breath, the energy of that moment in time imprints upon you and becomes your personal energy. And your Chinese astrology chart is really a snapshot of the moment in time when you're born, taken from the Chinese calendar system. So the Chinese calendar system can describe the kind of energy present at any moment in time using a system of elements and Chinese zodiac animals, which most people are familiar with. But these animals also contain elements. And so when you put all the elements and animals together, it tells a story of what the energy is like in that moment in time. So the calendar system is very predictive because it basically operates on the understanding that energy is cyclical. So once you've experienced an energy every 60 years, that energy will come back again, and we can look back and say, well, we know the last fire monkey was sort of like this, and this year will have some similar qualities. Not exactly, of course, but there are similarities. So that's kind of how the system works.
Okay, perfect. And so one of the things that I noticed when I did my Chinese astrology is I had to give the year I was born, the month, the day, and the time. So let's talk about that element of time, because what if I were like my parents and I didn't know what time I was born, or, just knew kind of the time of day just through, word of mouth or something like that, but everyone doesn't know what time they're born. So how do you get around that?
Well, there's a few things. First of all, the Chinese system, a Chinese hour, is really 2 of our hours. So if you know you were born around 1 o'clock a.m. or 1 o'clock p.m., we can pretty much decide that you're going to be the hour of the ox or perhaps the hour of the goat. We can, as long as we know which 2-hour window it falls into, it doesn't have to be exact to the minute necessarily. For people who have no idea what time of day they were born, there are different things that we can use to use a process of elimination. Well, it can't be this hour, it can't be that hour, and we can sort of narrow it down. But even with just 3 pillars, which is the year, the month, and the day, there's still a lot of information that can be gleaned from that. But we do have some tricks and some methods that we use to try to figure out an hour when we're not totally certain. But it is obviously better. The more information you have, and the more specific you can be.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. So one of the things that I wanted to talk about now is that after a person has a reading, does the information that's in that reading, does it change? And if it does, how often? Or does the outcomes or the suggestions that it provides for your month, like I did a year, so the things that were brought up as things for me to focus on for the year each month. Can I change those things based on things that I do? Or how does this whole thing work? How does it work?
That is a great question. And first of all, I have to stress and emphasize that Chinese astrology is not fortune telling. One of the most frequent questions I receive is, can it tell when I'm going to die? No, it can't. Basically, your Chinese astrology is what we call heaven luck. It's one of the 3 lucks that influence our life in equal measure. So heaven luck is sort of like your DNA, right? It's your hair color, your eye color, who your parents are. These are things that we don't really have control over that influence how our lives are and what our talents and gifts and proclivities are, or our strengths or our weaknesses. But ultimate, and Feng Shui is another piece of that puzzle. But the other 33%, the other third, the most important third, is what we call human luck. It's the choices we make, the actions we take, and the things that we do with the gifts in life that we're given. We can transcend what's in our chart. So our chart sort of tells us what our natural tendencies are, what our gifts are, what our strengths and weaknesses are, but it's really up to us to decide how we're going to use the talents that we have and the life we've been given. What are we going to make of it? And we can, fate is what happens to us. It's the things we don't get to choose, but our destiny is what we choose to make of our lives. And that's where our power is. So Chinese astrology can be very useful to give us sort of a heads up. It's not a prediction so much as a forecast, like a weather forecast. Like, it's very likely to rain, so you might want to bring an umbrella. It allows us to plan ahead and have some foresight and take precautions. If we know that we may deal with some issues that year, we can get ahead of some of these issues and take certain precautions to give ourselves an advantage. But really, ultimately, what happens in our lives is up to us.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. So another question that I have, because we talked about, you mentioned this idea of it's like your DNA. So speaking of DNA with families, are there any similarities or any type of comparisons that you'll see within a family unit? So, because it seems like it's really focused on when I came into the earth, which would be very different than anyone else in my family. But are there any similarities as far as the elements that are going to be found with a person, or does that have anything to do with it at all?
Well, first of all, let me say there are over 25 million possible combinations of charts. So each chart really is very specific to each individual. And the mixture of different kinds of charts you can see within one family is unique, as every family is unique. There can be a whole host of different kinds of groupings of personalities and charts. Myself, I come from a rather large family, and of course I've looked at all of my siblings' charts and my charts, and we're all very unique individuals. You can see family dynamics in a chart. You can see which siblings are more likely to be closer or have bickering, or who might be more alike and who might be more different. And you can see a lot of family dynamics in charts. But the kinds of charts can be completely unique. It really depends. Each family is unique, and each group of charts is really unique.
Okay, thank you. So the next question that I want to talk with you about is something that stems from a conversation you and I have had about health and how you can use Chinese astrology. And I think this is really the key that I want to focus on for this conversation, is this idea of how you can use Chinese astrology to support our health. Let's talk about that. How is this possible?
Well, it's possible because, as I said earlier, it is tied to the traditional Chinese medicine and acupuncture system. They're both forged on the same principles and same concepts, and the same 5-element and yin and yang theory underlie both systems. And there's a huge amount of overlap and integration between the two systems. So when I pull up a Chinese astrology chart or look at a chart, we're really looking at sort of a pie chart of the 5 elements in a person's chart. And each of those 5 elements relates to a system of the body. Perhaps, your Chinese medicine doctor is going to know that the wood system is your liver, gallbladder, and the metal system is going to be lungs and large intestine and your skin. So these systems of the body relate to elements. And you can see when there's a huge imbalance in a chart, either too much of one element or not enough of an element, or one element's missing completely, we know that that's the weak link in that person's chain of health. We know that if there's too much or an overabundance of an element, that's the type of system of the body that's more likely to become ill when that person is tired and stressed and under duress. That's where illness will show up first. So there's so many things that we can do, not having this information about which element needs support or needs some mitigation or reduction. We can use the 5 elements of food, and we can change our diet. Even in the Tai Chi Qigong practices, there are different movements that are different elements. So a very skilled Tai Chi or Qigong teacher can tailor a workout regimen to your particular energy and give you the movements and the motions that you need to strengthen a certain element and system of the body. So there are a lot of things that once we understand, we can use that information to help ourselves to achieve balance. And it can also tell us, based on the year energy, when we're more likely to have some challenges so that we can be proactive and get ahead of it. When we know when we may face a health challenge, we can go see the doctor. We can really make sure our diet is the optimal diet for us. We're not helpless. There are things we can do, and gives us a little bit of foresight.
Right. And I think that's the biggest thing that I have really wanted to highlight with this interview, is that Chinese astrology can be used as a tool in our toolbox. This is just another piece of the puzzle that you can use to have good health. You can use it in combination with a good diet. You can look at it, and if it says, you have it's likely that you may, have some type of fatigue or exhaustion, you would know, okay, this month I need to slow down a little bit. I need to plan on making sure that I'm, getting enough sleep at night, that I'm eating well-balanced meals, that I'm exercising, but maybe not too much this month. Just really focusing on filling in those gaps and using it as just what it is, as a tool, as an opportunity to get ahead of things that are a possibility of happening, right?
Yes. And in fact, this year is very strong Earth year. So Earth systems of the body are stomach, spleen, pancreas, and immune system. So people who have too much or too little Earth, we know that they're going to be maybe more affected by the energy of this year in terms of their health. So that's how we sort of use that information to inform ourselves year to year, month to month. We can see ahead of time what the energy of the year is going to bring to us so we can get ahead of it.
Absolutely. So if someone knows that they have a diagnosis, like maybe something serious, like cancer,
Yep.
how can we use Chinese astrology to work through that phase of life, through that disease, through that illness at that time?
We can understand how diet can help us,
Mhm.
eating very specific foods that will help bring balance to our bodies. We can also, of course, go see a Chinese medicine doctor who's going to understand. They view medicine from a very different vantage point and perspective. So they don't treat one part of the body, they see it as a holistic system, as an integrated whole. So that is a really useful tool to help bring the body into balance, as well as there are, breath work that we can, there's so many tools open to us. Cancer is a scary and challenging diagnosis, but from a Chinese astrology perspective, it's often an earth element issue. So if we look at what earth is to us and what we need to support it or to reduce too much earth in a chart, there are things that we can do, especially with diet. That's such a powerful, let food be thy medicine, right? So it's a very
Right.
powerful tool for us.
Absolutely. Well, Beth, thank you so much for your time and for your information as to how Chinese astrology can support us, especially in terms of our health. Can you, before we go, can you tell my audience the various services that you do provide and how they can contact you?
Of course. I provide full feng shui services, of course, as well as Chinese astrology readings. I do one-on-one readings, as well as follow up with my clients every year to give them an overview of each year. So once your home has its feng shui analyzed and your chart has been analyzed, it's a wonderful tool that you can always refer back to year after year to empower yourself and to give yourself as many tools for success as possible.
Absolutely. And Beth, we will put all of your contact information on our website at FengShui-it.com so that everyone will have the opportunity to contact you and get more information about Feng Shui and Chinese astrology.
Great. Thanks so much for having me. It's been a real pleasure to join you.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.